nice to see all of you. I have a handful of updates for you today. They're all of the items that were forwarded out to you in advance of the meeting. I'm going to start with the one that was forwarded to you just recently. We tried to have the staff update done by the 15th. We have made a couple of changes yesterday, and so we got it out to you on this morning. I apologize for the one-day delay on that. As of June 30th, 2020, I am pleased to report that every report that we have been provided reflects that Allegiant Stadium is on schedule and on budget, and will include all required project elements and will meet the project standards as set forth in the Stadium Development Agreement, as well as Senate Bill 1. The stadium project budget increased by $8.5 million to $1.98 billion during the June 2020 reporting period. You will recall that at its September 16th, 2019 meeting, the Stadium Authority Board conditionally approved between $25 and $70 million in third-party activation work. In February of 2020, the Stadium Events Company identified the first incidence of this work, which now stands at a total of $14.9 million. It's expected to reach about $49 million by the time the project has closed out. That process is going extremely well. My thanks certainly to Stadco, CA Icon, and their team for making sure that everything is properly documented and making that flow exactly how Don Webb had indicated that it would throughout this process. The staff has reviewed 29 funding notices and processed them with a total for a total of $1.76 billion, approximately 89% of the aggregate project. $197.9 million, roughly 40% of the total outlays, and 93.1% of the Stadium Authority Board's $750 million maximum contributions. Personal seat license proceeds currently account for roughly $549 million, or 31.2% of the total project cost. Stadco or the Raiders credit facilities comprise another $500 million, 28.4% of total project costs, and Stadco's cash contributions to fund the third-party activations account for the remaining $14.9 million, or just under 1% of the total project costs. The project schedule was generally unchanged during the current reporting period. To be clear, substantial completion has been and remains anticipated on July 31st, 2020. Project closeout was extended from October 31st, 2020 to November 31st, 2020 in February, and remained unchanged in June. Respecting the inherent uncertainty surrounding the COVID-19 crisis, a number of opening events continue to be scheduled for both August and September. We have noted previously that the tail or the work that is going to be completed after substantial completion is reached is currently roughly $145 million, roughly 7.3% of overall project budget, and certainly in line with expectations from the last update. The aggregate stadium project contingency decreased slightly from $22.3 million to $20.3 million in June. The overall project contingency stands at $9.1 million of project costs in this as of June. Change orders processed during June totaled $2.3 million, bringing total change orders for the project to $140 million in total. Las Vegas Stadium Events Company, commonly referred to Stadco, provided its monthly report on July 8th of 2020. As consistent with prior reports, indicated that the project will be on time and on budget. Stadco did note that installing furniture, commissioning food and beverage operations, and fine-tuning the mechanical systems have begun. All closeout issues, and with the cooperation of the Clark County Department of Building and Fire Protection, the Southern Nevada Health District, and various state agencies, Stadco continues to expect to have its temporary occupancy permit in hand by August 1st. The Construction Monitor, JLL, issued its 34th site observation report on June 25th, 2020. It was subsequently revised and reissued on June 29th of 2020. That report supported a draw of $69.4 million. This is inclusive of $8.5 million of third-party activations, and certified that, one, that all design agreements remain in full force and effect and have not been modified. Number two, that there have been no material deviations in the stadium costs. Three, that all required permits have been issued and are in effect. Four, all current draws have been used for project costs. Number five, the project is proceeding on schedule and will be completed by the scheduled completion date. Number six, that all funds previously requisitioned have been used for their intended purpose. Number seven, that there have been no material change orders other than those permitted by the development agreement or the design build agreement. And eight, that the construction monitor has no knowledge of any vendor liens, mechanics liens, or security interest that should be satisfied or discharged before the immediate payment of the request. The construction monitor once again indicated that the project budget is in balance and that the stadium is proceeding in a good and workmanlike manner and in accordance with all construction documents. It indicated the construction testing and certification were and that the project's manpower ramp up. Now, roughly 1,850 workers working 3 shifts, 6 days a week was appropriate for the current phase of the project. And finally, the construction monitor once again reiterated its belief that the schedule, although it has been and continues to be aggressive, is achievable and should be met by July 31st, 2020. Finally, the authority construction representative, Grand Canyon Development Partners, attended 5 regularly scheduled construction meetings, met with STADCO representative on June 22nd, 2020, and interacted with the project team on several occasions throughout the reporting period. Grand Canyon Development Partners reports the work is system testing, which is a critical path item for the stadium to receive its temporary certificate of occupancy, is ahead of schedule. Additionally, testing of elevators, cooking, hood suppressions, and other similar amenities to the stadium are well underway for county and health department acceptance. Mr. Chairman, I have included other items that Grand Canyon Development Partner has identified as either being on schedule or ahead of schedule. There are many of them. I know that Mr. Webb is going to provide his update. I'll defer the balance of that only to simply conclude that Grand Canyon continue to conclude that the project will be completed on time, that it will be on budget, and that all project elements will meet the project standards set forth in both the development agreement and Senate Bill 1. Mr. Chairman, if there are questions relative to the status report, I'd be happy to take those. If not, I'll jump into the other elements of my update.
Any questions for Jeremy? Okay, go ahead, Jeremy. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In addition to that, the revenue report, there are 2 financial summaries that we have traditionally provided to the Stadium Authority Board. The first is the revenue report. It is attachment 6B that Brian Haynes has up on the screen for your reference now. Year over year revenues for both April and May reflect the effects of the COVID-19 crisis. Now 96.7 and 97.5% respectively. Both of these continue to be preliminary. You'll notice that there are asterisks next to them, although we don't expect any material deviation. For the fiscal year to date, revenue through May totals $36.1 million, down 20.7% on the year. Tab 6C provides the financial summary report. It shows that project funding through June, as I mentioned earlier, is roughly $1.8 billion, approaching 89% of the total aggregate project budget. Note that the project budget does reflect an additional $14.9 million in third-party activation costs. So I'm accounting for that as we go through, respecting the fact that that is a below-the-line item for purposes of budgeting altogether. In terms of the bottom left-hand corner of this summary, you'll see the Stadium Authority finances, including where we are in terms of room tax revenue, as well as operating expenses. Room tax revenues appear to be consistent with the summary that we had at the last Stadium Authority Board meeting, and we continue to believe that Stadium Authority Board expenses will come in well under expectations. The balance for that will be transferred in to the waterfall to be used for the reserves for the Stadium Authority bonds. The bottom right-hand corner, I draw your attention to the reserve accounts that show that the Stadium Authority Board 2-year reserve currently stands at $68.3 million, or 76% of the full amount that is possible to be put into these accounts. That totals about $90.2 million. To date, the debt reserve not only includes the values, the monies that were put directly in when the bonds were issued, but also $11.2 million worth of interest earned on bond proceeds in the Stadium Project Trust. Those transfers continue each month and will continue as long as there is interest earned, respecting the fact that the Stadium Authority Board can only transfer in $750 million toward the initial construction of the project. Mr. Chairman, per your direction, about every other meeting or every second or third meeting, we are providing both two detailed summaries of the Stadium Authority Board accounts. The first of those that Mr. Haynes has up on the screen now is the Stadium Authority Board tracker. This shows all inflows and outflows from every Stadium Authority Board account and is tied back out to all of the individual bank accounts. These tie directly into the summary that I just provided to you. So unless there's some specific question around these, I'm just going to provide them for your review, other than to say that the first probably 10 pages are the ones that you may want to draw your attention to, as it shows the month-by-month transfers in and out of all the Stadium Authority Board accounts. Flipping through it, but also to Ruben Brown, who's been, frankly, incredibly helpful in making sure that all of the Stadium Authority Board accounting is ticked and tied as necessary and appropriate. With regard to the second, as I mentioned, there are two. Under line item 6E is the PSL tracker. This shows all the flows of funds in and out of the various PSL accounts. As you've seen previously, a flow chart that sort of shows how those dollars flow in and out is provided at the beginning, and then each one of the accounts is shown. Again, the summary that Brian has, and then the month-by-month overview also being included here for the board's consideration. Mr. Chairman, a couple of other, I wouldn't say minor, but other staff activities along with the PSL activities. STADCO has also provided the reports relative to the PSLs on time, and those were complete as well. Pardon me for a moment. I'm just going to plug my computer in as my cord came unplugged. Those continue to be on track and reflect all of the reporting requirements in both the DSL agreement, the PSL agreement, as well as the development agreement. So all on track and appropriate. The funding notice reconciliations have all been completed. We continue to work with Clark County on that. Thus far, 28 funding notices have been processed and paid. Again, that process appears to be working exactly as intended. And finally, the logging of notices and right to lien processing has worked very well and continues to still today. The only reason that I bring this up is that staff also developed a lien tracking process to make sure that we are routinely identifying any liens that are filed against the stadium, and we can track those liens as their progress continues. Obviously, there's an expectation that those will continue to exist in the future, just like they have in the past as the project gets to completion, but we feel well positioned to get that done, and certainly appreciate all of the folks that have helped make that happen. Mr. Chairman, that is the balance of my staff report. I would certainly welcome the opportunity to answer any questions that you or the balance of the board may have.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, after you.
Thank you, Ken. Jeremy, help me get your head around COVID, revenue stream, reserve, timing. What's your thinking?
Sure. Mr. Hornbuckle, we can send you a schedule that will have our projection going forward. Right now, we believe that in fiscal 2021, let me take one step back. Right now, for fiscal 2020, there's been sufficient revenue that has been generated to be able to make sure that we make the Stadium Authority Board can make all necessary payments on the stadium bonds as they currently exist. In fiscal 2021, we've done projections. We do expect that revenues are going to come in under expectations. We provided those projections at the last Stadium Authority Board meeting, and I'm happy to resubmit those if you'd like to take a closer look. We do have every expectation that the Stadium Authority Board will need to access the reserve funds in FY 2021 as a result of the fact that road revenue is going to come in substantially under expectations. Our revised estimates relative to FY 2021 is that rooms revenue will come in about 50%, a little under 50% of what was the pre-COVID-19 projection. And so that obviously is going to require access of those funds. At present, if revenues were to come in at zero, the Stadium Authority Board would have a roughly 18 months worth of revenue set aside to fund that debt payment. The expectation obviously is not that those are going to be at zero. And so right now the expectation is that, thank you, Brian. I appreciate you pulling that up. You're great. The expectation is that we are going to have more than 2 years worth of a cushion with reserve. Brian, projection revenue that was provided last go around. You can see where the pre-COVID allocation of funds was on the left-hand side, where the post-COVID expectation of funds was on the right-hand side. And you can see that there's an expectation of about $19 million that will need to be extracted from the debt in order to make sure that the bonds payments can be made. Again, the current balance in that fund is $68.3 million. So we believe the Stadium Authority Board is well positioned into FY21 and likely FY22. Obviously, we're going to keep a very close eye on these trends.
Thank you.
And Jeremy, just to add a little bit to that, we think about the number of years of reserve in terms of the average payment that we'd have to make over 30 years, and that payment ramps up over time, over that 30-year period. And the average payment is about $45 million. We're obviously on the early side of that. So our payment this year is just a little bit less than $35 million. And it'll creep up each year. We've got $68 million set aside. So while in the way the law is written, the way the structure of this is perceived, it would take $90 million to have what we call 2 years of debt service reserve. But functionally right now, we really have 2 years of debt service reserve set aside and with no revenue at all coming in. And what Brian and Jeremy have shown you here is the budget that was put together. That's about 40% of the room tax that we would have normally expected this year. I think Jeremy's current forecast for this year would be a little bit higher than that. And it's obviously hard to project over the next 12 months, but that's about what that is.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. First of all, that's the question. Thank you, Mr. Hornbuckle. That's the question I was leaning towards. Jeremy, I guess my follow-up question would be is, what is the minimum amount of room tax revenue we would need in future years to either stay even or begin to replenish the account? Is there a way to do that calculation?
Sure, Mr. Evans, I'm just going to flip over to to one more schedule here. As the chairman indicated, right now our debt service is let's call it just about $35 million in the coming year. That debt service, however, is going to escalate over the number of years. So the answer to your question is it's going to be slightly higher in future years than it is today. But right now, the Stadium Authority Board really has two primary obligations. Number one is its ability to operate the Stadium Authority Board, and the second is the ability to make the debt payments, obviously the debt payment being critical. So in order to do both of those, that budget's going to be about $35 million for debt service, gradually getting larger, and the Stadium Authority Board has a $2 million budget that increases for the rate of inflation. So those two numbers are the number we have to hit, not get into that, not dip into that reserve. However, of the $2 million that the Stadium Authority Board has in terms of its operations, it's only utilizing about $1 million of that. It's using about half of the amount of money that it has available to it. And so that reduces that just slightly in terms of what that need is to hit that break-even amount.
And from a percentage standpoint, Ken, that turns into about 2/3, maybe just a little bit more, maybe 70% of what we would normally think that we would collect would handle the operations and the debt service for the Stadium Authority. Anybody else? Was that it on agenda item 6, Jeremy?
Yes, sir, it was.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Agenda item 7 is an update on the community benefit been provided by Mortensen and McCarthy reflect that they are exceeding all benchmarks that were provided in the community benefits plan. 23% is the small business enterprise participation. You'll recall that that goal was 15%. Approximately $289 million have been committed to 164 small business enterprise firms. 39% women and minority, take that back. 39 women and minority owned businesses have been awarded $76.1 million of the work. 70% of all firms working on the project are Nevada-based firms. Workforce participation is 62% minority and female and 2% veteran. Hours worked are now approaching 5.4 million, and that's through May. My guess is Dawn has an update that's going to be ahead of that, with 79% of the project workforce being Nevada residents. Mr. Chairman, under the community benefits plan, I also wanted to draw the committee's attention to ASM Global's letter that is included, just providing a few highlights relative to the activities that they've undertaken from a community benefits standpoint. Clearly, as we're transitioning from the development phase to the operations phase, they're really getting geared up around that. A few highlights. They have established a community enrichment program that has been implemented to run alongside their internal procurement initiatives when appropriate. Interested vendors registering with ASM Global are being categorized upon application as local, small, diverse, based on self-reported data that is ultimately verified during the engagement. They have retained a community affairs consultant in an interim capacity to assist with community engagement while they go out and seek to retain a permanent community affairs manager position for the project. More than 40 community organizations representing targeted groups as outlined in the community benefits plan including local chambers, have been contacted both by email and or by phone, I guess I should say, in order to get additional outreach in terms of programs that are available. And they have started the preliminary identification of a community advisory board as already underway. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any additional questions and certainly would defer to the chairman of that committee, Mr. Evans, if there's anything that I missed or didn't include as comprehensively as he would like.
Mr. Evans, anything you want to add?
What I want to say and add is just that first and foremost, very glad to see on the construction phase us continue to have the results that we have where we're not only meeting but exceeding the goals that were set. That's great to see. And then at the same time, I definitely want to commend ASM Global for again hitting the ground running, putting some individuals in place. Glad to see they have a partner with MIS Project Management so that some things can move forward. Definitely like the report and the progress listed and cited in the report. And probably most importantly, I'm hearing from individuals that they've been contacted by ASM Global. So that's really, because I know that was a concern for a while. So again, thank you very much. What I will say is that we will plan to have a community benefits plan oversight committee meeting within the next 30 to 45 days, just so that we can close out the construction phase properly, but at the same time, continue to ramp up with the operations and the concessions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Any questions, comments from the board? Okay, we will move on to agenda item 8. Mr. Webb.
I think I had to turn my microphone on. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay, so Brian, I'm going to ask that you start the video from the beginning, please. And I'll try to do a little narration. As you recall, this is what it looked like 31 months ago, but today we're putting the final touches on a truly world-class facility. 5,000 individually inscribed granite bricks as part of the Legacy Brick Program. This program will raise several $1 million for charitable events and causes supported by the Raiders Foundation. Now, I'll put in a plug here. You can find more information about having your name included by visiting raiders.com/bricks. As you can see, most of the landscaping and the parking has been completed. Our videographer is obviously very impressed with this. And wayfinding signage has been installed throughout the site. He's impressed with the signage too. Along Dean Martin Drive, a large video marquee is nearly complete. On the southeast elevation, the 28,000 square foot media mesh is nearly installed as well. Shade canopies at 3 major public entrances where patrons pass through security magnetometers are being installed, and the interior of the stadium's already a comfortable 75 degrees. We've cycled through the installation and the removal of the artificial turf field and actually have moved the natural grass field through its cycle earlier this week. You can see it moving fairly slowly. It takes about 65 minutes to move it in or 65 minutes to move it out. And we won't make you watch the entire thing. With all but the final 600 seats installed, the crews are finishing the installation of guardrails and cleaning up the interior bowl, doing the final alignment on the 62,000 seats that have been installed. Here you can see the final cleaning taking place along the stairs. The signature torch has been virtually completed and is going through its final cleaning. It's very obvious from this profile, but what most people have not seen is from the base looking upward, the expanse of that 85-foot torch. And here they're installing the glass case that surrounds the base of the torch. The $1 billion view, or probably more like $5 billion view, that all of the networks are surely going to go to commercial. The concession stands are equipped. The suites are furnished. If you want to go into the field. And the stadium that we envisioned and showed you renderings of less than 3 years ago is nearly completed. Let me, if you will, let me just talk about the schedule for a moment. In each and every report that I've given to this board, I've stated with confidence that we would meet the goal of substantial construction completion on July 31st, 2020. This confidence was not always met with unquestioned acceptance. And to be honest, that skepticism was not without some bit of merit. After all, we started by developing a highly unique and structurally complex architectural design with a roof system that had never been used in the United States, not exactly a recipe for ease or quick construction. Then we took our preliminary schedule, which was 44 months, and we compressed it down to 31 months. And just to make sure that things never became boring, we dealt with a tariff war, a major production delay in structural steel, and a pandemic which played hell with manufacturing and interrupted supplies. Meeting this schedule has been no simple feat, but if for no other reason than for the sake of consistency, let me once again report to you that with 16 days remaining, we will finish on time. Let me speak now to the budget. In a similar fashion, I've reported to this board in each of my presentations that we are on budget. Through the monthly disbursement, which we are currently processing, we've spent approximately $1.8 billion of our $1.97 billion budget. Jeremy mentioned earlier that we've got a hanging amount of about $162 million remaining to be spent. That does not represent $162 million of work remaining to be done. After all, there is retention to be released for work that's already been completed. Plus, there's a normal lag between the completion of work and then when it gets billed and then when it finally gets paid. So it would be very misleading to leave you with the conclusion that we still have $162 million worth of work to do. We have far less than that. We simply have $162 million remaining in our base budget to pay out. And I am once again pleased to report to you that we are on track to complete the project, not only on time, but within budget. Finally, let me just say the last word on safety. Not that it's the third more important thing, but it is extremely important. We've always said to our crews that we'd rather finish a year late and $100 million over budget than have someone seriously injured. And I'm really pleased that with more than 6 million construction worker hours invested in the project, the safety record is beyond superb. The ratio of reportable accidents, is less than 1/3 the national average for major construction projects. I'd be happy to take your questions.
Any questions for Don? I just, again, want to say congratulations, Don. It's been a pretty remarkable 4 years, and getting to this point and being on time, and I get how on budget works. When, as you kind of change the budget, you can stay on budget.
I mean, as we enhance the project and we spent more of our money and none of your money.
That is completely true.
Yeah.
But congratulations on getting to this point. For a few of us who've been through this process, from kind of the beginning, right after the 2015 legislative session. It's been 5 years and 10 days since the governor appointed the Tourism Infrastructure Committee. It's been just a little over 4 years, I think, since we first met the Raiders at that committee in April of 16. So the speed, as well as the safety, the budget, the accuracy, the focus on what's been done is pretty remarkable. So we appreciate you and the Raiders leading that effort.
It's been, I mean, look, it's a platitude to say that it's a team effort, but it's platitudinal because it's very, very true. We have an outstanding team. The Mortensen people have been phenomenal. The McCarthy people have been terrific. The Icon folks have been, I don't know what we would have done without them. We really have a superb team of truly dedicated professionals working on this project. And the support from the Raiders home office and owner and executive staff, all of this came together really beautifully.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to agenda item 9, which is to review and essentially approve the suite access policy. We reviewed this policy at the last board meeting in May. Jeremy, if you want to give just a really quick overview again, that'd be great. And then we'll ask if the board has any questions.
Chairman, I'm more than happy to do that. I'd also like to note that Mark Arnold has joined us always for these meetings, but certainly for this particular item, if there's any detailed questions. As the board will recall, as part of the development agreement that was executed between the Stadium Authority Board and the Raiders Stadco, there was a provision to allow for a community suite, or what's commonly referred to as the authority suite, that would allow the suite to be used for economic development purposes and for charitable purposes within the community. The proposal that's in front of you is the way in which the community will have an ability to access that suite. It's intended to be an open and deliberative process whereby individual organizations have the ability to essentially fill out an application and will have an equal opportunity to be able to access the suite. There is a progression relative to how the suite will be accessed, including exhibition games that will be for youth organizations. There is an economic development priority between both the LVCVA as well as the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance that will have the ability to make early selections relative to identifying games where they think they can promote economic development and growth within the community. The next element that comes down are charitable organizations that are seeking to utilize the stadium, or in this case, the authority suite for their members. Then the last in the waterfall allows for an organization to essentially utilize the suite to auction it off as a fundraising mechanism to generate revenue specifically for that organization or for that charitable cause. Notably, there's a number of elements in terms of the policy that are designed to provide as much transparency and fairness as possible throughout the entire process, including, who may use the suite, the identification of those organizations, and how that process will ultimately play out. Mr. Chairman, if there's more detail that you or the board would like to go through, I'd be more than happy to focus on any section of the policy.
Any member of the board have a question or comment on the policy? And if not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Tommy White, motion to approve.
I'll second it, Bill Hornbuckle.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, that passes unanimously. Agenda item 10, Jeremy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Agenda item 10 is for the board to consider for potential approval and adoption, the Stadium Authority Board's 5-year capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2021 through 2025, and direct staff to request that Clark County transmit the approved document to the State Department of Taxation on the authority's behalf as prescribed by Nevada law. I would like to draw the board's attention to agenda item number 10. This is the capital improvement plan. It is a 2-page summary. The first page just provides a general background referring to NRS 354 5945 or 5945 is how I should properly refer to that, which is the requirement. This is a requirement of all public agencies to provide a 5-year capital plan. As Brian scrolls up, he'll show you what is the sort of most important element or the core of what the submission is, and this provides how those dollars are ultimately going to be used. There are 2 things that I would like to point out from here. Number 1, you'll notice that the total on the far right-hand side totals $1.272 billion overall. The reason that that's higher than the $750 million that is commonly referred to is because the Stadium Authority Board is the owner of the stadium, and the personal seat licenses have to be booked as a contribution made by the Stadium Authority Board. The $750 million, if you were to take the we were to take the bond proceeds amount, a little over $718 million, as well as the transfers in, that's simply the room tax that was pay-go funding, and you add those 2 together, and then you have to subtract out the cost of issuance, which is shown a little bit lower. That equals roughly $750 million. There's a slight differential in that because of the difference between the budgeted amount and actual amount of the cost of issuance. It's less than $5,000 in total. This is something that is a routine requirement. That said, I do want to express my thanks to Mr. Zagallo that is on the phone, as well as Jessica Colvin and her entire office for all of their assistance in pulling this together. If there's any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them, or certainly defer to Mr. Zagallo if there's anything that requires his attention.
Any questions from the board? If not, I would ask for a motion to both approve and adopt the Stadium Authority's 5-year capital improvement program.
Tommy White, second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. Jeremy, agenda item 11.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The final business item that's on your agenda today is to review and potentially approve the addition of Harris Associates to the Stadium Development Agreement projects team. As the Stadium Authority Board will recall, one of the provisions of Senate Bill 1 and what is within the development agreement is the approval of members of the development team. The Stadium Authority Board provided a broad approval of many members that were on the initial team. Stadco has brought on an additional member, that is Harrison Associates, that is building out some of the Raiders image storefronts in the stadium itself. Simply presented here for the Stadium Authority Board's consideration so that they can be included in the pay applications as they go forward. Again, if there's any questions here, I'm more than happy to try and answer.
Any questions from the board? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Tommy White, motion to approve.
Ken Evans, second.
Motion a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, that passes as well. With that, we will open it up for our public comment period. Jeremy, I understand you or Brian have a couple to read into the record. Is that correct?
Yeah, hi, Mr. Chair. Brian Haynes for the record. Yeah, I've got a few to read into the record, and if I could ask if there's anyone participating in the meeting If you want to go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll read through these, and then we'll address anyone that's got their hands raised wishing to speak. The first letter is submitted by Cheryl Peters, the project manager for the Focus Urban Development Corporation. This was submitted on May 27th. She writes, "Dear board members, I am writing on behalf of Focus Urban Development Corporation regarding the status of vendor awards for concession. We are concerned because we have had to submit 3 applications to Levy to participate in the Allegiant NFL Stadium project under Senate Bill 1, under the Raiders organization to be included in the concession selection. As of today, we have not received any communications from Levy regarding the vendor selection process, nor have we received any acknowledgement regarding receipt of the requested application. We were advised on numerous occasions that someone would get back to us after each submission, but that has not happened. Please help us to understand why we have to continue submitting applications each time we reach out to them for application status, and why there has been no acknowledgement of the same. I am hoping the Stadium Authority Board will assist us in identifying the reason for the procrastination and the repeat request for application. I would also like to know when Levy will be making an announcement of which vendors are chosen for concession, and will be notifying vendors who are chosen if this has not already been done. Any information that the board can provide is greatly appreciated. Thanking you in advance for your assistance." Okay, the second one was submitted via email from Elijah Johnson this week. He is with My Favorite Things Meat Company. His email reads, "Hello, I have a question I would like to be addressed during public commentary. This question piggybacks on prior public comment regarding Levy inclusion and or exclusion of African American food vendors in the stadium operation. From what I can ascertain from the public records and the questions posed by Cheryl Peters, I am doubtful that any African American food vendors from the Las Vegas community have been included in concession operations in Allegiant Stadium. The entire bidding process has been mysterious to say the least. During our demo, we were the only African American company present, and we were also only given the opportunity to fit into the lowest quality booth. I acknowledge that this could be an issue of our suspicion. In light of the recent social awakening, it is hard to imagine that the stadium wouldn't have a single qualified African American vendor from the community. Thanks for your time." And the final submission was from Mr. Arthur Lewis. He wrote, "Just want to thank everyone for getting the stadium built on time and on budget. I have a ticket for Garth Brooks' show. Looking forward to seeing the stadium. Thank you." All right, that's the end of the email submissions. And Mr. Chair, I do not see anyone raising their hand.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for your whole team's work on this as well. And I want to thank everybody for being with us today. And we are adjourned. So enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks.
Thanks. Stay safe, everyone.
Jerry.
Well, folks, that's adjourned. That doesn't mean that this is adjourned just yet. I'm going to provide some back commentary by way of reintroducing a particular report, and that will serve as the intellectual catch spill for what I'm about to say and present. And I think you might have some idea what this is, but bear with me for one moment, please. It is the Grand Canyon Development Partners document, or words that were part of the stadium project status report, and it reads as follows. I'm going to now go back and install it. Excuse me. Sometimes these things have a mind of their own. I'm going to go back and install it right now. Should only take us another second. provided I am, yeah, here we go. Where is this thing? Okay, that's it. This is it. Okay. Project schedule. And I'm going to read it word for word, and I would appreciate it if you would pay attention. It reads as follows. The project schedule was generally unchanged during the current reporting period. And this is for June, okay? Substantial completion is anticipated on July 31, 2020. Project closeout was extended from October 31st, 2020 to November 31, 2020 in February and was unchanged in June. Respecting the uncertainty inherent to the COVID-19 crisis, the stadium's opening event, Garth Brooks, remains on schedule for August 22, 2020. The opening preseason game between the Las Vegas Raiders and the Arizona Cardinals is scheduled for August 27, 2020. UNLV's first home game is scheduled for August 29, 2020, and the first official NFL game between the Las Vegas Raiders and the New Orleans Saints is scheduled for September 1st, 2020. We have noted that the project's tail, or the work that will be required after substantial completion, has increased. Roughly 144.6 million in project costs, that's greater than the 117 million I wrote, are currently anticipated to be incurred after the project reaches substantial completion, i.e. between August 2020 and December 2020. This work now stands at 7.3% of the overall project budget. All right. They did not note. They did not report that. The board didn't ask about it, either because they didn't read it or they were asked not to bring up information that was bad and probably handled it back channel. I would hope it's the latter and not the former. I would hope that they read it. But the truth of the matter is that the board should be very concerned that it's giving the appearance of consistently rubber stamping everything rather than questioning some things. Because if it has the appearance of doing that, it does on video. The minute any of these matters goes so wrong that they lead to a lawsuit, the board itself could be enjoined. I don't know that the board has an indemnification, like, oh, you can't sue us, because the question is, well, if you can't sue the board, who can you sue? Okay, that's a big problem, a big management problem that they need to clear up in some kind of way, because their own documents belie what is said on video during the meeting. Now, they could say, well, we said in the documents, we just didn't want to go through it, but it still looks like they're hiding information from the public, the taxpayer. See, this is not a private organization. I understand that Las Vegas has its way of doing things, but this is a gigantic public project. This is not a casino. This is not a 70-story hotel that is 90% finished and still standing, unoccupied. Okay? This is a public project that rests on public coffers for its success. What I mean by that is, some of you might say, well, gee, wait a minute, it's the hotel tax, and the hotel tax is paid by tourists. Well, wait a minute. The hotel tax was levied by a public organization, Clark County. It goes to pay a bond issued by Clark County that is paid for by the county's general fund if the stadium revenue from the hotel tax isn't sufficient enough to cover debt service costs, bond debt costs. That's the way it's written. That's why it's called a general obligation bond. It is not called a lease revenue bond. General obligation bonds, by their nature, rest on the general fund of the issuing organization. That's why this is called a general obligation bond. So there's a lot of not appreciating these tenets and presenting them to the public as if the public is stupid. And frankly, I don't think the public's stupid. I just think the public feels like it's helpless. It feels that way in all sense, especially now with this pandemic. But just because the public may feel like it's helpless, or just because the public may be helpless, is no excuse to advance a project taking advantage of the public. And essentially, that is what has been done. And it's really sad. I pray that nothing further goes wrong, but a lot's gone wrong. And Jeremy alluded to that in the Stadium Authority meeting when he said that he had now a track record of liens that were to be processed. Hey, everybody, welcome, by the way. And so it should be of concern. I remain that there are two primary actions that should be taken to right this ship. First of all, ask for a bailout. You're going to need it. Because this idea that, we've got this through the next 2 years while the debt service reserve is covering this is BS. Because no one wants to talk about what happens in the years beyond 2022 and 2023 when the bond costs go up as the revenue is going down, or actually gone down, all right? Because you're already there. The problem with the pandemic is, in all cases in our society, it exacerbates weak points in our economy. This is one of them, okay? So the weakest industries in our economy from a structural perspective, the ones that depend on, more specifically, tourism, people flow, are the ones that are suffering the most. Ask for a bailout. Also, I would seek, this is not going to go over well with some people, but I would seek two things. First of all, develop a tax increment financing zone around the stadium project as was originally written. Whoever took that out did the biggest bozo thing I've ever seen in my entire life. They basically took money off the table in anticipation that a private person was going to, they took public money off the table in anticipation that a private person was going to make up the payment difference, which that private person did not do. I don't care what the reason was, they didn't do it, okay? That was stupid. Put it back, because the original legislation had it in there. It was there. Put it back. And then this, raise the hotel tax rate. Raise it, because that's the only way you're going to get out of this situation faster. It's the only way you're going to have a cushion for the future and a better debt and a better ability to replenish the debt service reserve. This is a 30-year bond issue. This is not a 5-year bond issue. It's 30 years long. So those are the actions that I recommend. And from the looks of things, there are people who actually were paying attention. So, hey. Okay. So it is 5:04 in the East. Thank you for sticking around. I will see you all later tonight. God bless you all. And please wear your masks. Stay safe. Eat healthy. Lay off the booze. Save it to when we, get out of this. Okay. And God bless you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.